Hello to everyone. I am GIOVANNA LIVERI and I welcome you to the Byzantium. Today we will travel through a world that endured for over 1,000 years, the Byzantine Empire, or more precisely, the Eastern Roman Empire. It was a unique phenomenon in world history where diverse people coexisted under the rule of a single emperor and worshipped the same God within the framework of an organized Christian church. At the center of our discussion today are women, not merely as historical figures, but as agents of archetypal forms that shape the Byzantine world and continue to inspire us. Themes such as faith and devotion, obedience and power, motherhood and family, education and charity are just some of the issues that defined the position of women in Byzantium and influenced their daily lives. But before we meet some of these remarkable figures, let us first examine the social, political, and cultural conditions in which they were born, flourished, and left their mark on the Byzantine world. Imagine an empire that lasted for over 1,000 years, with its heart in Constantinople, the crossroads of East and West. At the top of the society stood the emperor, not merely a political leader, but the representative of God on earth. Beside him, the powerful court and the church extended their influence beyond the spiritual, touching every aspect of life, from daily moral guidance to political decisions. External enemies threatened its borders, while internal religious disputes, such as the iconoclast controversy, weakened its unity. And yet, Byzantium endured. Orthodoxy became the binding thread, the shared vision that held together a complex yet deeply unified world. Byzantine society was a vibrant mosaic. Greeks, Slavs, Armenians, Syrians, and many others coexisted under the same rule, united by their shared Christian faith. Aristocrats, farmers, merchants, and artisans all had their place in a society grounded in the land, yet thriving in its markets, ports, and city streets. Roman, Greek, and Eastern elements formed a unique blend, while the capital Constantinople, founded in 330 AD by Emperor Constantine the Great, grew into a cosmopolitan center of trade, arts, and learning. In philosophy, Christian thought dominated, shaping spiritual life, while ancient Greek philosophy was preserved and later transmitted to Western Europe. Byzantium safeguarded much of the ancient Greek literature heritage, harmoniously combining it with Christian principles, while these preserved works later became the foundation of European civilization. In literature, religious hymns, epic traditional songs about the heroes guarding the borders of the empire with their life, and metrical romances blended Hellenistic and Western models, while in the sciences, mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and philosophy flourished. Architecture and monumental painting showcased Byzantine skill and spirituality. From grand domed churches to wonderful mosaics on walls and ceilings, art combined symbolism with devotion, conveying faith through form and color. Within this rich and living framework, we encounter the women of Byzantium, sometimes silent in the shadow of power, sometimes taking groundbreaking initiatives, shaping archetypes that continue to inspire us today. Women in Byzantium embodied a world of contradictions. On one hand, society confined them to specific roles, expecting them to be modest, obedient, and secluded within the house. On the other hand, across the centuries, many women managed to surpass the societal limitations and leave their mark on history. Their daily lives, whether as mothers and wives, workers, or nuns, reveal a world that was both harsh and complex. Through sources, legal codes, and personal testimonies, we glimpse lives that moved between restriction and freedom, humility and recognition, fear and power. A woman's life in Byzantium often began with a heavy sigh. The birth of a daughter was not celebrated. From an early age, a girl learned to navigate a world defined by others. By the age of 6, she began learning reading, writing, sacred history, and music, not in a school but at home, typically for around 3 years before turning to domestic tasks. Her education was limited, yet far from non existent. Numerous private letters show that even women of modest backgrounds could read and write, revealing a far more nuanced world than often imagined. Because education was private, families prioritized boys' learning over girls. Noble families were an exception, teaching their daughters ancient Greek and mathematics. Society demanded modesty and obedience from women. To be socially accepted, a woman had to conform to moral codes prescribed by the establishment for female behaviors. She was considered virtuous if she showed respect and obedience to her parents and remained confined at home until marriage. Even her appearance had to reflect modesty. She wore simple clothes and covered her head with a veil during the few occasions she left the house. Her movements had to convey full submission, lowering her gaze, speaking softly, and walking with careful step. Attendance at church services was mandatory, and any outing required the accompany of other person. Marriage awaited women early, usually around the age of 12, with the onset of menstruation. Parents chose the husband and arranged the dowry, which nevertheless remained under the woman's management. Early marriage, 12 for girls and 15 for boys, was driven by two main reasons. First, a higher likelihood of fertility, as younger women were expected to bear more and healthier children. Second, in wealthy families, property needed to be secured, and male heirs were highly valued. The frequent wars also created a shortage of men, making early marriage even more pressing. Within marriage, women were responsible for raising the children and managing the household, and through their guidance, they could influence the future of their offsprings. Divorce in Byzantium was not uncommon, as the law granted women the right to request it for serious reasons. Unfaithfulness, the husband's physical incapacity, participation in a conspiracy against the state, attempted murder, mental illness, expressed hatred, the presence of another female in the household, prolonged disappearance, or if the husband chose to enter a monastery. These provisions show that the state aimed to protect women. However, social realities were different. Suspicion and strict public opinion often discouraged women, as divorce could damage their reputation and honor. Many endured abuse and hardship within marriage, yet not all women accepted submission. Some requested a divorce, while others pursued extramarital relationships, breaking the bonds of a society that demanded silence and obedience. Behind the official decorum, harsher realities existed. Mistresses maintained by men to ensure offsprings in case of the wife's infertility, slaves from poor families living under harsh conditions, and women in prostitution exploiting their circumstances for survival. Regardless of social class, these women lived in a world of strict limits, hard labor, and strict discipline, where even minor transgressions could lead to abuse or social stigma. The contrast between the modest, obedient women held as an ideal and those living on the margin exposes the hidden inequalities of Byzantine society, revealing a harsh core beneath the proclaimed protection and moral order. Regarding professional life, many women, particularly poorer or lower class women, worked outside the home to earn a living. Miniatures of surviving manuscripts depict women spinning or weaving, selling agricultural products, cosmetics, or other goods, managing women's baths or taverns, and participating in dance or theatre. Weaving was a central activity for all women, from lower to the healthy class, with higher class women dedicating much of their time to it. Professions related to public or urban administration were strictly prohibited. No Byzantine woman could become a public magistrate or lawyer. Even the simplest household tasks, cooking, washing, or maintaining the home, were considered beneath men, reinforcing that domestic responsibilities rested entirely on women. In the Byzantine world, beauty was both a means of personal expression and a marker of social status. Women, usually with long hair, styled it modestly, braiding it or letting it fall freely over their shoulders, especially in young girls. Hair was cut only in mourning, following an ancient Greek custom or as punishment for moral transgressions. Facial care and the use of perfumes were integral to daily life. Lilies, roses, and other plant-based products, often imported from distant lands, was applied to hair and body. Jewelry was another element of personal adornment and a sign of social standing. Appearance was not only a personal matter. In upper class families, husbands supported their wives' grooming as a well presented spouse enhanced their social prestige. However, in a patriarchal society, the church considered excessive attention to appearance sinful, comparing adorned women to actresses who occupied low social positions. Byzantine women faced constant social control, balancing personal expression with societal restrictions. The emphasis on bodily and facial beauty continued a deeply rooted tradition from antiquity. In ancient Greece, caring for the body and cultivating the mind were considered interconnected aspects of human harmony. Similarly, in Byzantium, personal grooming reflected balance, self discipline, and character. In daily life, women's baths played a central role, linking social interaction with personal care and beauty. Women not only cleaned and perfumed their bodies, but also met friends and relatives, exchanged news and experiences, and displayed social status through clothing and jewelry. Baths functioned as spaces for socialization, learning, and grooming. Young girls learned hair, skin, and facial care from older women, while elite women used gatherings to discuss charity, family matters, or social issues, always within bounds of modesty. Monasteries were unique spaces in Byzantine society, combining spiritual life with social and personal management for women. Widows over 60 often retired there, dedicating their time to prayer as well as charitable and intellectual activities. Monasteries was a form of retirement, but also they had a darker side. Daughters of powerful families, political rivals, or disobedient women were confined there, as well as repentant prostitutes seeking refuge and reintegration. Despite restrictions, monasteries became centers of spiritual work. Women distinguished for charity, church support, literary work, or influence could leave a lasting legacy. Through limitation and strict social norms, women found ways to emerge, transforming constraint into power and spiritual impact. Now, let's continue with the archetypes. When we examine the trajectory of archetypes from ancient Greece to Byzantium, we realize that their timelessness is rooted in collective memory, transmitted from generation to generation through myths, religious symbols, language, works of art, and exemplary behaviors. In Byzantium, these archetypes were adapted to the specific social and political context. Women were still confined to prescribed roles, yet history reveals small cracks in this rigid order. Enlightened women engaged in education, charity, religious life, governance, and intellectual pursuits, sometimes leaving a lasting mark. Unlike in antiquity, Byzantine sources include historical and everyday documents such as personal letters and manuscripts written by the women themselves, recording their lives, activities, thoughts, and choices. This allows us to understand their social position more comprehensively. Archetypes show us that there is a chain connecting women across time. They remind us that we are not isolated in the present, but part of a long tradition of female endeavor and creativity. By recognizing the figures and examples of these women, we can appreciate their sacrifices and wisdom, which bring us to the present and allow us to continue our own path with knowledge, awareness, and respect for history. At the same time, women from different eras enter in a shared dialogue, demonstrating that the role of women was never one dimensional but always full of contradictions. The baton carried by the women of ancient tragedy passes on the women of Byzantium and the archetypes they embody. Our first heroine is Irene of Athens. Irene was born around 752 into an aristocratic family in Athens and stood out from a young age for her intelligence and beauty. Her path led her to the imperial court where she married Leo IV. Although she was an iconophile, she did not hesitate to promise to act against icons to secure her position as empress beside the iconoclast Leo. This union placed her in a position of power, but also within a social circle where women rarely exercised authority. Yet Irene did not confine herself to the traditional roles of wife and mother. Her strategic mind soon became evident. When Leo IV died, her son Constantine IV was still a minor, and Irene assumed the regency. Her position was delicate and full of challenges. Political rivals and ambitious officials questioned her authority. With calm determination and strategy, she built alliances, manipulated opponents, and ultimately conspired to ensure no one could change her rule. In 797, making the most extreme decision of her life, she ordered her own son to be blinded to maintain absolute control. This act shocked Byzantine society, but made clear that Irene would not hesitate to cross moral boundaries to secure the throne. At the same time, she continued to support the church, promoted the restoration of icons, and her name became associated with the first restoration of icons established by the Seventh Ecumenical Council, ending the first period of iconoclasm, a theological and political dispute over the veneration of images. Irene's life embodies the archetype of the dark leader, a figure of unyielding political ambition. The tragedy of her decision to blind her son recalls Medea, who chose to kill her children to punish Jason's betrayal. Yet, as with Medea, the true motive behind Irene's act was the thirst for power. In both cases, ambition overrides natural bonds, leading to devastating consequences. Thus, Irene remains a vivid example of the dark female archetype, a woman who wields power and vision, but whose pursuit of the throne can sacrifice even the most sacred human relationships. Our next hero is Anna Dalassin. In contrast to Irene of Athens, who did not hesitate to blind her son to secure the throne, Anna followed the path of maternal leadership and strategic guidance. Born in 1025 into the distinguished Dalassanos family, she was one of Byzantium's most influential women and a key figure in the rise of the Komnenos dynasty. Combining nobility with unwavering will, intelligence, and ambition, she married John Komnenos, brother of Emperor Isaac I, and assumed a leading role in the family after his death, dedicating herself entirely to advancing her son Alexios I. Her sacrifices were immense. From her youth, she devoted herself to the family, defending its rights and protecting her children from political dangers. With patience and strategic foresight, she worked tirelessly to secure Alexios' path to the throne. When he was crowned emperor in 1081, Anna effectively became co-ruler of the empire. During her son's campaigns against the Normans and other enemies, she managed the governance of the Roman territories, guiding the empire with strict discipline for about 20 years. Her granddaughter, Anna Komnene, in the Alexiad, praises her political quick thinking, hard work, clear speech, and kindness towards the poor. Alexios I describes her as one soul in two bodies, a teacher and a guide, recognizing her significant role in his life and reign. His deep respect and love highlight not only her role as a mother, but also her influence as a ruler. Anna is not merely the archetype of a leader, she embodies the mother leader. She does not limit herself to raising her children, she guides, protects, and opens paths that seem utopian, even toward an empire. For when a mother dreams for her child, she gives them wings to believe in themselves, and the impossible can become possible. Our next heroine is Theodora, wife of Justinian. Theodora, the Empress of Byzantium and wife of Emperor Justinian, was born around 500 AD and emerges as one of the most dynamic and determined figures of her time. She came from a humble family. Her father was likely a servant for beast handlers, and her mother also of modest origins. Theodora began her life as a mime performer, acting in popular theatrical productions, and some contemporary writers accused her not only of coming from the theatre, which was already considered low status, but also of prostitution. Her rise is therefore even more remarkable. From humble roots, she became one of the most powerful women in Byzantium history. During the Nika revolt of 532, her resolve to prevent Justinian from fleeing the city saved both the throne and the empire. Furthermore, through her initiatives, she sought to improve the status of women and the vulnerable in the empire. She reformed laws prohibiting marriages between nobles and women of lower social status, advocated for abortion rights, ensured that women were not punished for unfaithfulness, expanded women's rights in divorce, allowed them to own property, and activated the death penalty for rapists. While she became a model of social reform, conservative circles often disapproved of her actions. She is said to have died of breast cancer. It is important to note that the only source that harshly and often ironically judged Theodora was the historian Procopius, who criticized her origins and early life. What this shows is that, like many women throughout history, Theodora was often evaluated not for who she truly was, but based on factors such as social class or survival choices. Beyond embodying the archetype of a strong and decisive leader, Theodora also carries the shades of the misunderstood woman, whose life and actions were judged harshly for reasons unrelated to her true essence. We move on to Theophano. Theophano, the daughter of a humble merchant, leveraged her beauty and fearless personality as tools to rise to the top of the Byzantine court. Romanos II first noticed her in the marketplace selling goods and was immediately captivated by her charm. Despite her modest origins, Theophano quickly scandalized her surroundings with their determination and faced constant criticism for her background. In the early years of her marriage, court intrigues soon elevated her to a woman who knew how to wield power. Using her influence over her husband, she confined his sisters and potential rivals to monasteries, securing her position and dominance. The excessive lifestyle, non-stop celebrating and pleasures contributed to the tragic end of Romanos II, while Theophano remained powerful and undisputed in the court. After his death in 963, Theophano assumed authority, although rumors implicated her in his murder, claims that remain unproven. She later married the capable and dynamic general Nikephoros Phokas out of necessity, as women of the upper classes, and especially the royal family, were often pressured to remarry. Theophano knew she could not rule alone or protect the throne for her children. Phokas cared for her and her children, but over time a distance grew between them due to her love for John Tzimiskis, Phokas' nephew. Victim of her own love, Theophano actively participated in the conspiracy that led to Phokas' brutal and unjust assassination. Her punishment was swift. Tzimiskis exiled her from the palace to ascend the throne following the patriarch's demand. Unable to bear this, she confronted Tzimiskis one last time, unleashing her fury, and then she fell silent. Theophano was exiled to a monastery that also served as a prison for women of powerful families or political opponents. Later, she was restored to the palace by her son, the eminent emperor Basil II, the Bulgar slayer, luckily acknowledging her efforts to protect his throne. Theophano embodies the archetype of the betrayed woman, deeply wounded by the person she loved the most, leaving her drained and changed for the rest of her life. Her return to the palace could not restore her fully, and she remained transformed until her death. Our next heroine is Saint Kassiani. In contrast to the politically powerful women of Byzantium, there were women of wisdom and spirituality. Kassiani was a brilliant figure of the Byzantine world, combining beauty, intelligence, and deep spirituality. Born between 805 and 810, very little is known about her personal life. What is known, however, is that her beauty made her a highly sought-after bride even by Emperor Theophilus himself. According to Byzantine historians, the mother of young Emperor Theophilus, following the family tradition of selecting a bride, invited in 830 AD the most beautiful and prominent daughters of the empire to the court, instructing Theophilus to present the golden apple to the one he chose as his wife. During the ceremony, Theophilus approached Kassiani and said, "From a woman came all evil." Kassiani, without losing her composure, replied, "And from a woman come all good," referring to the Virgin Mary and emphasizing the hope and salvation that women bring to humanity's history. Scholars consider this clever and carefully phrased response as a sign of her independent thought and strong character. In the silent world of 9th century Byzantium, Kassiani's voice rang out boldly. Although the emperor did not choose her as his wife, perhaps because he found her answer too bold or was intimidated by her intellect, he gave the golden apple to the beautiful yet modest Theodora. Kassiani, however, chose to dedicate herself to monastic life, proving that through her spiritual work she could contribute even more than she might have as an empress. She founded a monastery with her own funds and devoted herself to composing rare poems and hymns. Her most famous work is the Hymn of Kassiani, sung on Holy Tuesday, inspired by the story of the sinful woman whom Jesus saved from stoning and who later washed his feet in gratitude. This choice further illustrates Kassiani as a vital link in the long chain of women who achieved the extraordinary. Through her hymn, she reached out and eternally protected women forced into sin. According to tradition, Emperor Theophilus, shortly before his death, wished to see Kassiani one last time. By then, a dedicated nun, she hid in her cell to remain true to her vow. Theophilus found her unfinished hymn and moved to add a verse. Kassiani read the addition and completed the hymn. Kassiani embodies the archetype of the wise woman, leaving behind an immortal spiritual legacy that transcends the centuries. Through her compassion for the sinful woman, she recognized and affirmed the worth of every woman who was erred, showing that knowledge and sensitivity rise above social conventions. Next, there is Anna Komnene. Anna was the firstborn daughter of Emperor Alexios I, born into the greater of the imperial palaces, yet her fate was marked by contradictions. Despite her status, Byzantine society did not allow her to claim the throne she considered rightfully hers, solely because of her gender. This denial became both a wound and a source of strength. She did not remain silent. She struggled, conspired, and even attempted to overthrow her brother John with the help of her mother, involving her husband Nikephoros Vrienios. Unfortunately, her plan failed due to her husband's fear, which provoked her outrage. The highly intelligent and educated princess saw the throne slip from her grasp not because she lacked talent, ability, or birthright, but because she was a woman. Yet her failure did not break her. It led her down a different, more enduring path, writing. The Greek poet Kavafis saw her as a true Greek, a revolutionary who refused to submit to the constraints of her gender. Anna was not only a princess, but also the embodiment of a woman who refuses to remain on the sidelines, who fights to be recognized even if it means confronting opposition with every inch of her strength. Her life's work, the Alexiad, became her response to defeat. Within its page is not only the history of Alexius I, it is Anna herself, her voice, her perspective, her demand that history be written by a woman. The Alexiad reveals her wisdom, her education in philosophy, medicine, and mathematics, as well as her ambition to stand on equal footing with the men of her time. This detailed, documented 15-volume work remains a valuable resource for studying the era. Anna Komnene is a timeless figure. Across the centuries, we encounter women like her, capable, intelligent, perceptive, denied their due by society solely because of their gender. Anna possessed courage of conviction and a clear, unwavering vision in a society that demanded women keep their eyes lowered. These are only a few of the most influential women who lived in Byzantium. However, Byzantine women were not only powerful leaders or wise spiritual figures. There was also a category of unsung heroines who were compassionate and dedicated their lives to God and to serving the vulnerable. A notable example is Saint Hippomone. Born as Helen Dragassis Paleologina, she became a model of compassionate empress. As the wife of Manuel II Paleologos, she cared for the people with boundless love, supporting the poor and the sick. She raised her children with Christian virtues, love and obedience, while her special devotion to monasteries gave her strength and courage. After her husband's death, she became a nun under the name Hippomone, continuing her charitable work, founding a retirement home called Hope for the Hopeless, and supporting monastic communities. Her life embodies the archetype of dedication, care, and empathy, making her a living example of humanity and social service in Byzantium, a beacon showing the right path. And thus, the voices of these strong women broke the silence of previous centuries. They did not limit themselves to the roles imposed by their era. Through their actions, wisdom, and virtue, they laid the foundation for modern women. They demonstrated that strength, knowledge, and social contribution can coexist harmoniously. Today, studying their lives teaches us that leadership, wisdom, and compassion remain cornerstones of a just and human society. By learning their history, we strengthen our collective memory and recognize the importance of active participation by women in the world around us. Their examples inspire us to cultivate the same virtues in our daily lives, creating a future where justice, knowledge, and humanity coexist with courage and responsibility, encouraging today's women to continue along the path they paved while opening new paths and taking further steps forward. Thank you very much.